One of the hostages was a friend of mine, James Foley. Jim knew he was going to die. He wants to write a letter, but he can't, so he tells it. So he teaches Daniel the letter, who learns it verbatim.
I know Daniel Rye's account, who was the Danish prisoner, he mentions that Jim was like, he was very like stoic, and he didn't say much, and he wasn't easily rattled or thrown around, and he was kind of like a pillar of strength for the other hostages to look at.
Well, so here's a strange thing, and linking it back to my kid, and this is why I thank God, because my kidnap was nothing in comparison to theirs, but here's the common link. Daniel Rye, or this Danish hostage, Jim knew he was going to die because he figured out as these Europeans slowly, one by one, are being released, that clearly the Europeans are doing negotiations. So anyone being left behind, i.e. the Americans, the British, were going to be killed. Jim still is giving solace to others. And he wants to tell his mother, he wants to write a letter, but he can't. So he tells it. So he teaches Daniel the letter, who learns it verbatim. So when this Danish hostage is released, he comes to America and he tells Diane Foley, Jim's mother, the letter. He's remembered it and writes it. And it's a great privilege. I read that letter. So here's a weird thing about the love, and this is supposed to be a nice story. So I'm now talking to the mothers, and I'd never met Diane Foley, but I know from my experience as a hostage, I said to you earlier, I'd made peace. It's funny, I'm crying now with this, not long on, but I'd made peace with my life, and my only hard thing in captivity was the thought my death would cause suffering and pain to those I leave behind. I'd had a good life. And I was thinking, I'm happy. My only thing was, I don't want my family suffering now, because my captivity and death casting a shadow. So years later, trying to interview these ISIS hostages to get justice for my friend. I know, without having ever met Diane Foley and all his family are suffering, I know from my experience that in captivity I was buoyed up by love of my childhood memories of my brothers and sisters' holidays. I know, I can feel it in my bones, that Jim would have had the same experience. But when it comes to this life, you don't want to lie or give false hope. But I say to myself, look, Jim's a mate of mine. And so I knew he would have been wanting me to tell the mother, look, I was full of love for you. So please don't let my death cast a shadow of, please, I don't want you. It's the last thing you want when you're about to be killed and because you're feeling so in love with your family, you don't want them to suffer. So I know from my experience, you'd want your last words to be, please don't suffer, live well. And I thought, well, I don't want to say that to this woman, unless it's true. But I thought, well, you know what? I know in my bones that's what Jim would have been thinking. And anyway, as my mate, he won't mind me telling a white lie because he's my two blokes. So I said to Diane, look, Diane, I just want you to know Jim would want me to tell you that he was full of life's joy and full of memories of his childhood summers and full of love for you and his siblings. And she went, thank you, Sean. Was really touched. Said, you know what's funny you say that? Let me show you the letter Daniel read. I read James Foley's letter home. It was exactly like I told her, Mum, please, I'm full of love for you. I remember running around the kitchen with my brother and sister. He was buoyed up by memories of love and joy, and says, please don't now let my death cast a shadow of your life. I'm looking at that letter, and I sent her a email, saying Jim would want me to tell you for life. So I got it right. Who knew? She said, look, Sean, do you mind if I send your letter? I said, Jim would want me to tell you, please don't suffer. He would be full of his before death, full of life. She goes, do you mind if I share your letter you sent to me to Marsha Mueller, the mother of Kayla Miller. I went, look, Diane, I'm not so sure. And I'm thinking to myself, I know I'm right. That's what they want. But Jim's a mate. I've never met Kayla Miller. Obviously haven't met her mother. I don't want to let the mother believe something that may not have been true. Maybe Kayla, her story of being raped and tortured, poor young woman may not have been. Chances are not full of love and hope and light. But Diane said, please, can I send it to the mother? All the mothers, the hostages, very friendly. So I went, okay. Feeling a bit ill at ease, so I couldn't talk I could talk for my friend Jim, felt confident, not for this hostage Kayla. Diane Foley shares my letter saying, look, Jim would want me to tell you he loves you and full of love and memories. Please don't mourn him. She sent that to Marsha, who then calls me up in tears. And this is it. It says, it's like Kayla was talking to me through your letter. Do you mind if do you want to see the letter? So the Yazidi girls Kayla had written a letter, gave it to the Yazidi girls. Marsha Mueller said, do you want to see the letter Kayla wrote to me from her cell? I read this letter. I'm in a dark cell, but overwhelmed by the light. This is the common experience all hostages feel in that. So she's overwhelmed by light, a love of God, belief in God, memories of childhood summers, the love. So because she got so much unconditional love from her parents, her family, upbringing, her holidays, that's what fills you with light in captivity. So all the horrors, the torture, rape, can't penetrate, extinguish that light. And she's wanting her mother to know, because you have that intense experience when life's about to end, you're overwhelmed. And it's a really strong, powerful, you may doubt it later on, but so me saying to Diane, and now it's been said to Marsha, my friend Jim, and by extension Kayla, would want you to know, please don't be sad, we're filled with life. It's being confirmed back by these letters. So that is intense. So when I had that, knowing those mothers and the privilege of knowing them, never met Kayla, but Kayla's in my prayers every night. I feel that I felt responsibility to get justice for them. And so doing this interview with the killers and them confessing to me, and then that being used as evidence was sometimes, as journalists it's a good thing.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah, look at that.
And for people, there's a couple excerpts of Jim's letter in this book, and I just read them. I think this is when they're talking about when Daniel Rye, he got released, and he went to Diane Foley and the Foley's house.
He had to learn this because they couldn't write it.
Right.
So he had to learn it off by heart, and then he wrote it down and met Diane.
And it was because they had pen and paper in the cell, but they were afraid of him smuggling it out, the repercussions from the ISIS guys.
Oh, so yeah, he didn't write it down. He learned. Well, he may have done it in the cell. He learned it off by heart, by rote. Right. Then they tore up that letter, and Daniel carried it out in his head.
So here's a couple excerpts. The title was "A Letter from Jim" and included a note to his grandmother. Grammy, please take your medicine, take walks, and keep dancing. I plan to take you out to margaritas when I get home. Stay strong because I'm going to need your help to reclaim my life. Katie, who I think was his sister, his younger sister. Katie, I'm so very proud of you. You're the strongest of us all. I think of you working so hard, helping people as a nurse. I'm so glad we texted just before I was captured. I pray I can come to your wedding. I have good days and bad days. We're so grateful when anyone is freed, but of course yearn for our own freedom. We try to encourage each other and share strength. We're being fed better now and daily. We have tea, occasionally coffee. I've regained most of my weight lost last year. I remember so many great family times that take me away from this prison. I feel you, especially when I pray. I pray for you to stay strong and to believe. I really feel I can touch you even in this darkness when I pray.
Yeah.
And
he remembers running around the kitchen with being chased by his brother. And I what's funny, I knew in my heart that It just shows in the worst experiences, it's a common human experience. If you've had that unconditional love and faith, it buoys you up. Kayla's letter is just intense. You know, the young girl, and she was kept on her own away because of the men in all the male hostages, Jim and Dan wrote, were often collective in a group. They had common friendship to keep them going. Kayla was often on her own. And never lost faith, and never lost strength, and never lost love. And I'm in awe. You know, you see. You know, earlier we were talking about going to war zones, but there's this young American girl from Arizona letting these Yazidi girls escape, not going with them because she might endanger their life. You know, that's courage. There was also an American aid worker, this lovely young woman, Kayla Mueller. ISIS made some statement that she'd been killed in a bombing raid, but I knew the story. She was held, and they admitted this to me. They confessed, Sheikh confessed that yes, Kayla Mueller, this young girl, was kept by them, the Beatles. And they never helped her, never gave her any medicine, and she was terrified. I knew her from reading the reports. She had then been passed to al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, and was raped by him in captivity. Now, I'm confronting these two little thugs and reading about this young American girl, Kayla. This is where I talk about they kidnapped the best of the best. When she was in captivity with Yazidi girls, this group who were held as sex slaves, here's the head of this Islamic group claiming, you know, I'm not an Islamophobe. I had great memories in the Middle East, but these people, ISIS, calling themselves Muslims. So the head of ISIS has his own harem of prostitutes. Kayla Mueller in captivity, and we know this for a fact because some of the Yazidi sex slaves escaped and gave their accounts to the authorities. She looked after these girls, and she hid from them her own pain and trauma, didn't want them to suffer. They managed to escape, some of these girls, and said to Kayla, come with us. And Kayla made a decision that they, with a white American foreign girl, they'd be less likely to be able to escape. They'd be captured. So she told them to leave without her because she would endanger their lives. Wow. And that's, of course, ISIS could never let that girl live because they can't have a young woman say, I was raped by the head of ISIS, this religious. So she was killed in captivity. And it was a privilege for me to meet the families of these people. I never met Kayla, but I felt very close to her. And obviously my friend James. You know, I always have a smile because he was, and this is the thing, here's the lightness in the dark tale. People like us do these things. I mean, your life, I was saying to Diane, we're living life, loving life. You know, Jim had been in Libya, covering Libya, you're doing work. You asked me this at the beginning when I was in Kashmir. There's a lot of other jobs you can do in journalism. You can interview Kim Kardashian, no offense, but, you know, celebrities, but you're doing work that counts. You're traveling. And when and people say there's so much good going on in it and your life ends, but it's the people you leave behind to pick up all the pieces. But I don't think we should mourn the Jim because he lived life to the full, and so did Kayla.
Man, thank you for sharing that stuff. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
God. You want to take a little break before we get into to Russia or what?
Bloody hell.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the interview. If you got anything out of this video at all, please like the video, leave me a comment, tell me what you thought of the video, tell me who you'd like to see on the show. I really appreciate the support. It goes a long way on these platforms, as you guys know. Most importantly, I have some excellent interviews coming up in the future that I'm really, really excited about. So please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of them. But that's it. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it, and hope to see you again soon.